Welcome back to Generation Orange. It's a Wednesday evening, and as you guys know, we did this for the first time last week, but we're wanting to do this kind of like midweek. Let's touch base, let's talk some ball, because it's a busy season of football. This is one of my favorite times of the year. You're playing some of your most meaningful football. You got people moving all around the league. You got trade deadlines. You got injury. You got probably, just the most exciting football. And we're coming off a big win on Sunday. I feel like we've got a lot to recap. So let's just get right into it. And I kind of want to start with tying up a few loose ends that I feel like we just missed a little bit. You know us, we get so emotional, especially with a good win like that. So I want to start there. We talked a little bit about rookie performance, and we didn't really discuss it on the show on Sunday. I think we're just so concerned with we don't care who scores as long as we're scoring. But the rookies actually had a standout night and a very statement win at a critical time, especially now with injuries. So what did you see on Sunday from the top three rooks?
Yeah, good point. For the rookies, it is time to eat as well. They came, obviously RJ Harvey had the hat trick, that kind of, and then Barron has a pick at the end of the half, right? Great pick actually. And then of course that that laser bead that Nix threw to Bryant in the corner of the end zone. Great, yeah, and you're so right. We get so emotionally involved with the game that sometimes we forget that there was a story about those rookies, a big story, and we didn't even really mention it. But hats off to them because they all delivered big time, and we kind of
Yeah.
get a little bit of a sneak peek of what's to come for those with those guys.
Yeah, and what's really cool is every single time a rookie shows out, it just makes me think, man, when they're playing well, you don't even really know what their ceiling is. Like I think we had that with Bo Nix last year. He was playing at a very high level, and it just makes you think, man, what else can this guy do? And it's kind of the same for all the corners. One that I feel like we gotta shout out, especially because we need a hero on Sunday. Jody Barron in the corner, first pick of his career in the NFL. He's looking great. He is so exciting. And I want to go back to the draft in April because a little bit of a funny story. I'm in college and I was studying abroad that semester. I was in Europe, so the draft was happening. I would typically watch the draft live, like anybody, any crazy Broncos fan. I would typically watch the draft live, but the draft was happening probably at 2 or 3 in the morning where I was living at the time, so I didn't watch it live. And I remember, Dad, you and I discussed kind of our expectations, I guess, for the first round especially. And I remember opening my phone the next day and thinking like, this was actually the last thing on my mind. No,
Yeah.
nothing could have prepared me. I wasn't mad at it though. I wasn't mad at it, especially not now. And we see, with this PS2 injury, just how important it is to have depth at that position.
Right. And I want to mention this because you bring up Jahdae Barron, and there might be a lot of Bronco fans that will be surprised if he isn't starting next week or while PS2 is out. And I just want to emphasize this because I don't want anybody to think that that is an indictment on Jahdae, because don't think it is. When they drafted him, it was a situation where they felt he had no business being there at that point in the draft, and it wasn't really a position of need, but just the value was too good, and you can't have too many good corners. Okay, so
Clearly,
my get
case in
yeah
point.
my guess would be we saw Chris Abrams drain on the field a lot as soon as Sertan was out in that second half, right? And I don't now. I think there's a good chance that they're also going to mix it up and play more zone than normal with PS2 out of there. Okay, so that's another thing. But as far as who will start at each side, they could put Riley primarily over to Sertan's side, or they could leave Riley where he is. But I would really heavily. I think they will put Chris Abrams drain on the outside. That's what I think they'll do. And if they do that, they would probably just leave McMillan at nickel and then sprinkle in Jade like they have been. I would expect his reps to go up a little bit, but all I'm saying is this doesn't. If you see Jade not starting, it doesn't mean that Jade is disappointing in any way. It's just a credit to the guys that they already had on the roster. We saw Chris Abrams drain develop. If you recall, we had what was that guy's name? Levi Wallace last year. Levi Wallace came in when Moss was hurt last year. Levi Wallace got smoked against the Browns. It was our old boy that lit him up.
Jared
Judy,
right.
yes. You haven't really heard from Levi Wallace since then. I don't even think he's in the league. Point is, Chris Abrams, drain number 31, stepped in at a time of need and played well. You know, he really
and
played well.
100%.
So yeah,
and McMillan ended up going on to have a really great game against Cincinnati with the pick, and I think he even
right.
contributed heavily to that Indianapolis game as well. And I don't want to harp on this too much because I feel like we've talked about this so much, especially the last 3 weeks. But earlier today, Dad, you and I were having a conversation once again about Riley Moss. Because for those of you who don't know, we're such sickos that, you know, the hour and a half that we spend talking on the camera about the sports is not enough. Because my dad called me this morning, we probably spent 45 minutes talking ball. So I digress. You brought up a really good point. People are so quick to criticize Moss, but when he was hurt, we were feeling it last year. And now there's a little bit of I don't want to say that there's a vacuum because I do think we have enough depth in the secondary, but with PS2 out, these corners are going to be tested. If you are an offensive coordinator looking to take down the Broncos, you have to be very thankful. You're thankful that this injury is coming at a time when no one's happy about injuries, of course, but that's the spot that you're going to attack naturally. So it's going to be a tall order for our cornerbacks, but not one that they've ever cowered away from. And I'm excited. I think it's actually going to be a very, very good game this weekend against Houston. But we'll get to that in a second. Just wanted to touch on the rookies because you had said it. They just had such a remarkable game, and we're going to see more of them, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah, I think that was really encouraging, you know. And I think you touched on this during our last cast, but we see the potential of the 1-2 punch of Dobbins and Harvey. You know, that was just on display. Now, in all fairness, that Cowboys defense was decimated, and they really did seem. I think I recall a time or two, even before the first half was over, with guys with their hands on their hips and just the altitude. You know, that wasn't the best competition the Broncos. That wasn't anywhere near the type of competition the Broncos are going to face later in the year, especially this next week. Them boys in Texas, you know, they're playing good defense, those Texans. So, you know, a lot to look forward to. I think it is going to be a good matchup. But
right.
yeah, hats off to the rookies. That, you know, that's just you love that on every level.
Absolutely. And then another thing that we definitely love, and I'm kind of surprised, I don't actually think this came up at all on Sunday, which is kind of remarkable because, I mean, anyone who knows us knows that we freaking love these throwback uniforms. I will say it, I will yell it on the rooftops, bring them back. I really think that there's no uniforms in football that even come close to how awesome those look.
I couldn't agree more, you know, and it's funny because when I was a young Bronco fan, and those were like the uniforms I grew up with, I thought they were the best looking ones then, but I was a Broncos fan, so I probably would have thought that, you know what I mean? It's recently, upon, you know, seeing them resurfacing again, I really believe if I've never seen football before, and I'm watching the highlights on a Sunday night, and I'm seeing all these different uniforms, and then I see the Broncos they just jump off the page. They're beautiful, you know. And there's everybody likes what they like, but I just think they're so universally popular and well received that the only thing that um, you're hearing it like the players love putting them on, right? The media, all the medias that talks about them. One of the things I'm hearing is, well, why don't they just switch back to these, and then why did they ever not have these uniforms? And so I kind of got to thinking about it, and it's kind of an interesting story because they are so nice, and why wouldn't you wear them, right? Well, it kind of it's a number of things, I think, and to really, this is just my recollection of it. It started with the Jacksonville game. Okay, I've referenced this game to you many times over the years.
And this was
It,
before my time.
this is 1996, and those Bronco fans listening that were there, you don't need me to explain. You went through it. It's such a dark time. The Broncos had the Broncos had lost three Super Bowls recently. Well, they'd lost four, but three Super Bowls with Elway badly. They finally, a few years later, they get a team built up, and Elway's got a running game for once, and they got everything's in order, and they're ready to make a run. And somehow this team that had only been in existence for two seasons goes into Mile High and beats them. I don't want to get into the details of the game because that's another show, but let's just say it was devastating. After enduring those three Super Bowl blowouts as a young fan, as tough as those were, this was just monumentally worse, okay? And you have to understand, okay, it wasn't just the Broncos that went through this. With John Elway personally, it's as hard as it would be to even conceive. You look at the Broncos now, and they've won three Super Bowls. They just have this very prestigious history. Well, at this time, okay, it wasn't seen that way by many people. You had your haters out there, okay, like you do now. Now, you don't have these keyboard warriors on the internet haters, but if you're bumping around in sports bars or you're on talk radio, there was a lot of, not necessarily the most knowledgeable fans, but fans that just thought the Broncos sucked because when they're on the biggest stage in the world, the Super Bowl, they got destroyed, right? So,
But they
for
did have the
them to,
best uniforms.
they did have the best uniforms. Back to the uniforms. So, the Jacksonville game works out like it does. It's devastating. Fast forward a couple months later, I don't know, it was sometime during that off season, and we're just still, Broncos country is still numb, okay? I can tell you, at least for me, Bronco fans that I knew. So next thing we know, it's probably March or April, and there's this press conference. We see it on Sports Center or whatever. Elway and a couple of the other Broncos are out there modeling these new uniforms that they're gonna wear, and they're hideous, especially compared to what we can't believe it. Okay, it's like things. How could things have gotten worse? We're still processing Jacksonville, and now you're gonna do this to us? I can't even explain it. It was surreal. Now, I should point this out in all fairness, okay? We love Pat Bowlen, right? We know that Pat Bowlen has been as much, other than maybe John Elway, I would say those two guys are the cornerstone of everything Broncos, basically, okay? I'm not trying
Right.
to,
And if you're new or younger, just for reference, Pat Bowlen was the previous owner of the Broncos. Remarkable guy, really set into play this culture of winning, which, to be honest, a lot of organizations don't have. So I just wanted to put that out there because sometimes unfamiliar names, and
yes,
you're like, what is this guy talking about?
right.
May he
The
rest
one
in
thing,
peace.
the only thing Pat Bowlen didn't have, and we should always count our blessings, right? And this new ownership, you know, Pat Bowlen, he was rich compared to me and you and most of the people listening. He wasn't one of the richest owners in the NFL. Okay, he didn't have millions of dollars in a vault waiting to pay all these free agents and all this stuff. But yet he wanted to be competitive. He wanted to be maximizing the salary cap. He wanted to be paying coaches. Of course, he's a competitor. So I'm bringing this up because the why they did these uniforms. Okay, they had an agreement with Nike, and Nike had already been kind of doing some of the merchandise, but basically, and I don't know all the details, but the long and short of it is Nike was deeply involved in the design of these new uniforms. I mean, you can almost see a swoosh on those legs, and in return, the Broncos would receive a little more residuals on the sales, etc. Okay, I don't know how it all worked, and it wasn't. The point is this: they made this change, this uniform change, basically, to get more resources to help them compete. Now, back to them competing. So this Jacksonville loss, a lot of you are familiar with Shannon Sharp, right? And Shannon Sharp loves to talk, right? We know that. Well, Shannon Sharp loved to talk back then as well. When they talked to him about the Jacksonville loss, he was quoted as saying, "This is so big. This is the type of loss that would set an organization back several years." Okay. And I remember reading that quote and I'm thinking, wow, really? And I get it. Now, Shannon Sharp is wrong a lot of the time. Okay. And fortunately, he was wrong about this because
he was wrong this time. Yeah.
Yes. I think most of you know the rest of the story because this was 96. So 97 and 98, the Broncos would, they would take care of business, in 2 consecutive years. And, we wouldn't change any of it, right? Elway's been quoted as saying this. I think a lot of other people, most Bronco fans that went through this, I think they would say, hey, we wouldn't change a thing because after the Jacksonville thing, it was what, it all happens for a reason, right? But back to the uniforms, okay? Now you have a situation where anytime they would win back-to-back Super Bowls with these uniforms. They've an organization that have never won a Super Bowl. All of a sudden, they win 2 in a row. You got the highlight of John Elway doing the helicopter in the Green Bay game, and that's in these new uniforms, right? So it was really like, okay, fine. I'm not superstitious, but if it ain't broke, don't fix it. These uniforms are beautiful. Yeah. So for years and years, it was not an issue for any of us. And and don't get me wrong, we still like the old ones better. I had a buddy who got a tattoo of the Broncos logo around that time, but he got the old one. He didn't get the new one. So that's how it was for a few years. And then I think in the early 2010s, I don't remember the year, but I want to say it was a Thanksgiving against the Cowboys, and they trotted out the uniforms, and it was glorious. It was great. We're like, all right, we get to see them again. And then I was thinking, well, maybe they'll do this every few years. That would be great, right? And years went by, and it didn't happen again. And then there got to be a point where we got to see the Chargers were trotting out their old powder blue ones. The Patriots were wearing their ones. All these other teams were doing it, and I'm thinking, okay, well, what about us? Why not bust out the old, royal blue? And they didn't. And so that went on for a few more years. And I'm kind of scratching my head because it just didn't make sense. It was the perfect time, and the Patriots were wearing those a couple times a year. Why weren't the Broncos doing that? So I saw a presser, this is probably about 10 years ago. And it was after, I think Pat Bowlen had passed. If he hadn't, he had already give the team, the team was
in place.
The trust was in place. And so they had a post-season presser with, the coaches and John Elway and Joe Ellis. Joe Ellis was the basically the CEO of the trust. So he was kind of like the de facto owner, effectively. And they asked Joe Ellis about the uniforms. And he basically, I don't remember the exact word, but he was like, yeah, no, not on my watch. He didn't want anything to do with them. He's kind of a bit of a blocker. And he would be a bit of a blocker in some other, there's other
In
podcasts
other
for other
ways,
stories.
yeah,
Yes.
right.
But that, and then I'm like, okay. And again, I don't agree with it. Hey, even if you think they look horrible, what about the fans? It was pretty common knowledge that the fans wanted them back. Anyway, I digress. Fast forward to recent times with the current ownership, and these guys, they really, I think they're doing great. I, I don't know what. Personally, I feel the new uniforms are kind of. I like them. They don't blow me away, but they're fine. I actually am a big fan of the logo on the helmet. I think it's great. I don't think it's quite as nice as the old one, but I like it. You know, and the way they have it now, where we get to see the OGs 3 times a year, I'm pretty happy with it. Now, do I think they should go back to the OGs most of the time? That'd be fine too. And then maybe if they did that, I would like to see them display the ones that they won those 2 championships with once or twice a year, like they did these ones. That'd be fine too. And the cool thing is, you just have, because the old ones are they are so just majestic. They set the bar, right? But the other ones that they had in the late 90s up till recently, hey, they won 3 Super Bowls in those uniforms, so they're special too, right? So they all have a place. But I think it's kind of interesting to me. A lot of teams, I give them credit. You look at, the Packers, the Raiders, the Bears, the Cowboys. A lot of these old teams, they got their uniforms nice the first time, and they just never messed with it, And I think most of the really iconic, good-looking uniforms were fit. They were done like in the 60s and the 70s. It's not like you need AI to create a good uniform. They kind of had the right idea all those years ago for these uniforms, and I just kind of think they're overdoing it in the recent ones. But anyway, I've carried on about that long enough. It's real enjoyable to see them out there like that. We got to give props for our current ownership for handling this the way they have been, because they just look so. And by the way, I want to point out, because a lot of the memories of those orange uniforms back in the day, like I remember they would play flashbacks of that Jacksonville game, or highlights of that Jacksonville game, and I'd be like, and then you see the beautiful uniforms, and yet that's how they ended, So those uniforms, unfortunately, were associated with losing on a lot of levels. But now, I just want to point out, recently the Broncos are 3-0 in these uniforms. I'm just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Broncos Country, Generation Orange family, we'd love to hear from you. What do you guys think? Are you in favor of just scrapping this look and going back to the throwbacks? I also totally love the throwbacks. Or do you like the new logo more? Like, we want to hear everything you've got to say. And this is, I think, something that you and I have disagreed on a little bit, Dad, because I never saw the old school ones. Not, that was before I was around. That was BA, before Adriana. But I have very fond memories of the navy jerseys that they would wear, which they don't have anymore. But I always really, really liked those. And I know you're an orange guy through and through. I really loved the navy. But even just thinking back, you mentioned like, oh well, these uniforms are associated with winning and or losing. You're so right, because even when I picture Super Bowl 50. I mean, you just picture a very specific kind of uniform, even though I would never even count those as a top even 3 or 4 necessarily. I totally get what you mean. And you're right. Hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And we still have 2 more games this regular season in which we get to see those beautiful uniforms on display. One of them is the Chiefs game. So hopefully that little luck will extend. I want to take a moment because the trade deadline is approaching. And one of the things that made this offseason a little bit different for the Broncos is we didn't actually see a lot of turnover. We didn't actually see a lot of changes roster-wise, which is a good thing, I think, generally speaking. But There is some question marks right now, and obviously some moves have already been made. My number one question is because I do feel like some people do not believe that Cortland Sutton is enough at wide receiver one. And I read in the Schefter report Monday morning that potentially the Broncos were making calls for Chris Olave, Saints guy, and A.J. Brown. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think are the odds that a new wide receiver comes to Denver?
Um, well, if Schefter's reporting that, then I would say they're bigger than I thought they were. I mentioned in our last one that I didn't think they would make a move for a weapon. Now I don't know. They did pick up Mercedes Lewis. I don't know if we consider him a weapon, but he is a tight end, and I think we need a body at tight end, right? And I think I like the pickup. I mean, I know he's like 41 years old, but if he can still block and maybe run a route or two here and there, I think he'd be a great locker room guy. Um,
Gotta love the
now,
older man.
yeah, but back to your question, I'm going to hold the door on what I said before and say that I don't think they will. Um, but at the same time, if they do, they do, I mean, we did pick up that extra fourth rounder, trading Bailey, right? So we do have a little extra draft capital. Um, but I don't know. I'm trying to think who they would pick up and where they would fit him. It's I just now Mims has a concussion situation, but if that's not going to be a long-term thing, I just feel like the Broncos kind of check the boxes at wide receiver, and I mean Court is Court, and yeah, for being honest, he's dropped more catchable balls than he normally does the last few games. I don't worry about him shaking, cleaning that up. I think there's a lot of trust with Bo and Court. So I think Court's our number one the rest of this year, no matter what. If they get another guy, so be it. I just don't think they would kind of become the de facto one. And then if they do get a guy, I'm thinking, where do they fit in? I mean, you have Mims, who's the shifty, fast guy that can take the top off, that can also, take a jet handoff or a end around or a bubble screen or whatever, do all those things that he can do so well. You have Franklin, who's developing. We know he's got speed, but he's developing, in between the numbers and making those tough catches. He's developing as a blocker. Speaking of blocking, Bryant's been an excellent blocker as a rookie, and now he's developing as a receiver. So I don't know. I mean, it just seems like what they've been trying to do is working. And I think it was on full display last week. Granted, we're not going to be playing the Cowboys defense every week. Maybe it works out. Now, when is the deadline? Is like the third? When is the
It's the
deadline?
fourth.
Okay, so it's after this week, right? I mean, literally,
Mm-hmm.
I could see a situation where they have a couple. Maybe they've tested the waters on a few players, and they kind of have a gauge of what it would cost, and then they kind of see what happens this next week. Obviously, a guy could get hurt, right? But if not, maybe Franklin is disappointing or whatever, and they say, okay, yeah, we do need to make it. Maybe they give it one more week to see what's what before they do it. But all this being said, gun to my head, I'm saying no. They're going to stay the line with wide receiver and tight end. Well, okay, let me backtrack on that one. If the tight end is a different animal because we are very thin there, I think that's a legitimate possibility. I don't know who's being shopped, but if there's a fit there, especially on a guy that's a really good blocker that can receive, yeah, I could see that if the price is right. I've heard some speculation about from reputable sources, good media guys that I like, speculating on inside linebacker, and I disagree with that too. I think with Greenlaw coming back and Stranad playing so well and Singleton being back, I think we go with our guys in inside linebacker as well. But that's me. I could be wrong. We'll see how it plays out. What do you think?
Yeah. That's, I it's hard to say. To be honest, I don't maybe this is kind of a hot take. I actually don't feel strongly either way. I have a lot of trust in Cortland Sutton. I think he's remarkable. And I would be okay if they brought in a guy, somebody like AJ Brown. I think AJ Brown especially is a very similar type of wide receiver to Cortland Sutton. So I mean, I don't know. Kind of tall, big, whatever. It
Yeah.
wouldn't necessarily surprise me if Olav comes in, just because we know Sean Payton kind of he's got a knack, of course, for New Orleans guys, and likes to bring in his own boys. I could see it as a possibility. I totally agree with you if the price is right. I don't want to give up. I don't see any like major kind of trading Nick Benito plus a second rounder kind of thing. I don't necessarily think that's on the horizon. So
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I actually think it was really inspiring to see the kind of um, momentum, or just what is the word, efficiency on offense with the guys that we have. I mean, we spent 10 minutes talking about how well these rooks played.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say off the top of my head, I think AJ Brown is not on the table. And the reason is I just don't think that that's Sean's philosophy because with AJ Brown, there's going to have to be a big contract involved with that trade. You know what I mean? It's going to have to be one of those things where, yeah, we trade for him and then we extend him or pick up a really big deal or something. I think we're priced out of AJ Brown at any given point. And now it would be different if we were desperate. If Sutton was out for the year or something like that, it might be a different situation because I do feel this team is so special. We're looking to make a run come hell or high water. So yeah, you don't rule that out if it's just an absolute necessity, but I don't think it is. I really think the crew we have is getting it done. I was kind of looking at some numbers, and this surprised me. The Broncos right now, in terms of they're the number 9 ranked offense in the NFL. Okay, now that the ranking is based purely on yardage, right? But still, that's the official. And by scoring, I think they're better. They're like number 6 or 7 in the NFL. We've had it is, which is kind of crazy to me because how many 3-and-outs have they had?
Right.
And now we saw the game, so we know that they've been hot and cold. We know that they had those spells of 3-and-outs, and then they had all these points in the fourth quarter, and it was kind of we know how it all worked out. But still, at the end of the day, their offense is at the it's not at the top tier, but it's well above average, and it's getting better, right? It's trending upward. So now look, they're going to get put to the test against the Texans this week. We will know more after that. But I don't know. I think I'm looking for them to just kind of stay the course and keep doing what they're doing. But
Yeah.
I kind of agree with you too. It's not that important to me whatsoever. Whichever way they go, if they do make a trade, I'm just going to trust that they have good reason to do it, and that it does make sense. Of course, we'll evaluate it anyway, but I don't I don't think they need to be desperate, which is always where you want to be. Just like when they drafted Jahdae Barron, they weren't desperate for this position, so they took the best player that was available, and so yeah, I think sure they're going to be taking phone calls because you always do your due diligence, but they don't need to overpay for somebody or they if something comes around, if something makes a lot of sense and they're like, oh wow, yeah, we'll take that, maybe there's a deal there, but I don't think there has to be a deal there. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
I agree. Once again, Broncos country, we'd love to hear from you guys. If you have thoughts on this, please let us know. Just before we wrap up here, I want to give a few little shout outs. You mentioned Dad staying the course or just seeing things through. Well, we've got some people, some subscribers who have stayed the course. Very specifically, Ross Roybal, you are the GOAT, number 75 subscriber. I'm always catching your name in the comments. We love to hear from you. Eureka33, I mean, week in and week out, he's been on the live streams. He's been on the pre-recorded cast. He is always there. You catch my jokes. I'm a funny gal. I really appreciate it.
Ding dong,
so
man. Ding
I
dong.
just want to
Ding dong, yo.
ding dong, ding dong, yo. We love that.
Yeah,
And you got my
Rico.
joke about Nathaniel Hackett playing Candy
Yes,
Crush.
yes, he did. He did. He did. Yeah, no, we got some OGs in there, man. We love you guys. And we, also shout out, we got some family and friends that I know, you watch, some of them aren't even Bronco fans and they tune in. So we can't say how much we appreciate all of you that watch the show. I mean, it's so much fun for us. And we just love being as much of a part of Broncos country as we can be. So thank you all for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us. I mean, I feel like we covered a lot of ground today. Are we missing anything?
I don't think so. It's on to the Texans, right? Road game,
Yeah.
good defense. A little interesting tidbit. DeMarco Ryans, the coach of the Texans, was drafted the same year as our new tight end, Mercedes Lewis.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
They were both drafted. They were both drafted in 2006. I was 1 year old.
Yeah.
I was just a baby.
Yeah.
That's
and
how old these guys are.
Sean was just starting his NFL head coaching career. He'd been an assistant for a while. There is one little tidbit about this Texan games. We need to take this team seriously. They had a nice win against the Niners. I will say this. I'm not a huge CJ Stroud guy. He seems like the nice guy. I know, but something about him rubbed me wrong. The first time we played, he was a rookie. I don't know if you remember this. He got in Alex Singleton's face, and he ended up drawing a penalty, or a personal foul penalty from Singleton, and then taunted him after the fact. And then, I was just like, come on, man. Because it was one of those, I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was one of those ones where it was a ticket, it was a flag that shouldn't have been made, but it was deliberately drawn by Stroud. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, kudos to Stroud for picking up the 15 yards, and that's part of the game. Okay, fine. But here's the thing. Literally like 2 or 3 plays later, was when that kid Tank Bell got all messed up. I think he broke his leg or something. It was a devastating injury.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I'm watching the presser after the highlights of a presser, and you see CJ Stroud crying about it. And hey, I'm not saying, hey, this is, but call me what you want. I'm just thinking, you know what? You sat there and taunted a guy after drawing a personal foul flag. Okay. Now these flags, why are these penalties invented? These personal foul penalties. What is the premise behind them? It's player safety. So if you're going to go ahead and you strategically draw one of these flags and then taunt my guy about it, I don't want to hear you cry about it when somebody gets hurt. I'm sorry. Say what you want. That's just how I feel. So I kind of got a little bit annoyed with that kid, but whatever. Maybe that's just me. I know he's got some game, and they've got some players. I'm looking forward to it. I think it could be a really good game. He does have
some game. Yeah, he does have some game. I have a little bit of a personal story with this guy. When I was at Super Bowl 58, I met him at Radio Row. He was really just a chill guy. Like I don't want to say he's like monotone, but he's just, I don't know, kind of roll with the punches, nonchalant kind of guy. But it was really sweet that he was young at the time, obviously. I mean, he still is, but I mean, especially in the league. And I remember he got so excited. Brett Favre was there, and he was just excited to get to know him. And I thought that was kind of cool because, I don't know, just a little sign of like, you're still a fan too. You'd be surprised how many of these, like, literally professional athletes, like, they don't really even care about the sport. So I will say I have a lot of respect for him. I think he's really talented. I think he's in a little bit of a dogfight there in the AFC South. I know the Colts are on top, but the Jags, to everyone's surprise, are battling it out. I think they actually have a
Right.
win. They're a win above Houston right now, so they are looking to be in the mix. They don't want to be third. They don't want to be third seeded in the AFC South. So they're
Yeah.
hungry for a win. I think the Broncos are hungrier. It's all going to come down to Sunday. I think we're going to learn a lot about our team, just we do every week. Um, and we, as always, will be here the post game, giving you your Broncos recap, all emotions raw. We chat a little bit on the phone sometimes, but everything that you see on here is very. It's true. It's from the heart. I mean, and this is just us talking. It's not a lot. Really, none of this is scripted. We're just laying it all out there. I want to wrap up. We're at the 40-minute mark. I don't want to go on too many rambles or too many rants because
Yes.
we will see you guys on Sunday evening.
Yes. 40. They've had enough. Go Broncos.
Go Broncos. Thank you guys once again so much for tuning in. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so that you never miss another episode of Generation Orange. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Cannot express our gratitude enough. And we will see you Sunday evening after we hopefully are an 8-2 football team. This has been Adriana and Les on Generation Orange. We are signing out.